Okay, so I guess we can just hop into this. Yeah. My thoughts, I've got a few questions. I think that we all kind of come from, in our conversations, we've kind of talked about some similarities between our backgrounds and growing up in fundamentalist evangelical Christianity, and kind of what that whole process looked like, from noticing that there was something off to leaving, and like everything that's entailed there. So that's what I wanted to talk about. And I think that both of you guys have different experiences when it comes to where you're at now as individuals. And I think that both of them are extremely healthy. So those are kind of things that I want to get into. So Marcé, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, just to kind of fill us in, what did your background look like? Were you in a specific sect of Christianity? Or what did that whole process look like for you?
I grew up I'm in Texas right now. This is where I grew up, in the school district. I don't know if you guys had this issue too, if you grew up in a rural areas or small towns with not great school districts. So what ended up happening was, I think in kindergarten, the school district that I was in wasn't that great. And my mom enrolled me into this evangelical private school. And then I went from there. I never really went to church there. Like my parents they went to like a small Baptist church. It's like a non-denominational, and then it was like non-denominational. And right around middle school, because all of my friends went to this huge church, and most of my social group went to this church. And also there was always this implied encouragement to, you're not in the right church. You're not out of line with God because you're not here with us fellowshipping. You should be here with us all the time, right? So in middle school, like I went to, Naturally. They had these little things called like Teen in Touch, which, are like these like, someone gets up and speaks. It's at someone's house. We all like eat, snacks and talk about Jesus and stuff. And so I decided at one of these events that's what I was going to do. So I joined, and then from there, I went on 2 missions trips, a couple of missions trips in high school. And then right around 2001 or 2, I left and went to public school. And then it just, from there, I was just, on a path to hell, I guess. So.
Yeah.
To be frank,
that's how it goes.
Yeah.
So, okay. So it didn't last terribly long then. Out of curiosity, where?
We went to Ireland, and then we went to, Italy wasn't a mission trip, so I'll take that up. But it was a high school trip. But we went to Ireland. We went every year. They would do like Mardi Gras, passing out tracts and things like that. Yeah. So, and what I realized too, it really wasn't so much as a mission trip as like there were like connected international churches. And I think that's something that people don't talk about quite a bit with non-denominational churches, is like sometimes there is some missionary quote unquote work happening, but in some of these bigger churches, it seems more of like a connecting, going to other churches that they're affiliated with, and kind of building them up, as opposed to like actual going there to convert people in a predominantly Catholic country, which makes no sense now. So,
Right. Yeah. No, that's pretty rad though. Ireland's, because I had my fair share of mission trips as well. And as problematic as they are, I wouldn't, trade those experiences, because I got to see some pretty rad stuff. So
me too.
Yeah. But you said, so during high school, you went to a public school, and that's kind of what severed that tie for you?
I started my cousins kind of went to church there, and they didn't go to school there. So like I started making friends outside of the majority of people I'd grown up with, and there were people that went to our church that were public school kids, but it was always implied that we shouldn't mingle with them. Even in our vacations, were separate, because somehow they were going to be bad influences on us. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, there were some kids that went to our school that obviously bucked the system. And music was always a huge thing for me, because I like rap. I also liked, like Rage Against the Machine. And I liked, I wouldn't call myself a goth at all or anything like that, but I definitely just had Christian music for the most part is, unless it's like some like gospel or some of the old school stuff that's like blues, it's pretty terrible stuff. It's
so that was a
huge thing for me.
Yeah. I still only listen to DC Talk, but
yeah, that was good. DC Talk was decent though in comparison.
It was,
to what all the other stuff we had. So yeah, I think their influence, and then I just we had. I can say this publicly. The pastor of the church, his daughter, and our youth pastor were killed in a plane crash.
Oh man!
2000, yeah, they were on a small plane, and that didn't do it. But because I just left the school, and then I was doing stuff at church, and then that accident happened, and it kind of was a shift for a lot of people. But yeah, that was a huge part of it. And also just wanting to do normal teenage things, and also being aware that I just started having these feelings about art not being bad. Art shouldn't be, there were other people going to churches that were less legalistic. And I think that I started to realize that I was, essentially becoming your own person. And so I wasn't completely out. It's taken me, nearly a decade to really get all that out of my system. And some people never do. I thought it had taken me a long time, but it's you go, you come back. So yeah, I just, struggled in college, and then now I'm just full blown, nothing, I don't want anything to just do with that kind of Christianity. Right. So
I hear you. Yeah. It's wild to realize how much has actually sunk its teeth into you and how much you actually have to work through mentally. So Tamarams, I obviously already know, but for the sake of everybody else, tell me about yours. What did your Christian life look like?
Yeah. So, I grew up in a Christian house, and we always went to church. I grew up in a small town, so we would go to a small church out there, and then we would drive to Albuquerque, which was the big city. And we would go to a big church there. Both of them were non-denominational Calvary churches. Mm-hmm. But that was, where do I even start with it? So, when I was 5, I did the Sinner's Prayer at a vacation Bible school, and we were always doing different vacation Bible schools. And I also went to a private Christian school just for a couple years. But I was pretty friggin' hardcore about it. We, very involved in youth group, doing all the small groups and the mission trips and the summer camps. And then even at my public school, trying to start prayer groups and, just that really annoying, pushy girl. That was me. Mm-hmm. And then for what would have been both mine and Josh's senior year of high school, we both did School of Ministry. And that was
the sigh
too. I just I don't even know how deep to go here. So we did that when we were 18, and that was more mission trips and more indoctrination. I think a lot of the youth group stuff really centered around purity culture. I don't know if you experienced that a lot.
Yeah.
In yours. Yeah. So just constant shaming about the female body being the female body. If you ever have a sexual feeling, God forbid you're a sexual being. So that was, staying pure, staying a virgin was a big part, I think, of my identity too, even if I didn't necessarily gloat about that, but it was still that's who I am, and I have to protect it at all costs, so because of that, Josh and I got married at 19, which I don't regret, thankfully. And then we both, it was funny because we both hit this, we went from very, Arminianist that we chose God, the Holy Spirit basically kind of reached his hand out and we chose it. And then, it's so funny looking back at it, because now I'm I I don't care. But then it was like this life-changing thing that I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm reformed. Like, I think God chooses us, and you know, who cares? But it was a really big deal. And that shook my faith a lot, because there was a little while where I was like, if that's the case, I don't know that I want anything to do with this God, right? Like, why would he pick some people to save for heaven, and why would he send some people to hell? And I was not feeling it. But like I did with a lot of things in Christianity, I just kept like, well, you know, I just have to accept it. I just have to learn to accept it and push it down deep and keep going.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And then we were committed in our next church that we went to for 10 more years.
Yeah.
10, almost 10. Yeah. Before finally bowing out.
Mm-hmm. What was it? What was it for you guys? Cause I know what it was for me. What was the straw that broke over? What was the
straw that broke the camel's back?
Yeah. I was going to use that analogy.
Of finally walking away.
Yeah. What made you guys want to?
Yeah. For me, it, you know, my dog's probably going to bark really loud in a minute. Sorry.
It's okay. I can cut this part.
Gosh, I mean, I had always had doubts for sure about like, we could be wrong about this. But then there was the whole, is it Pandora's box of like, well, you know, if you're wrong, nothing goes wrong. But if you're right, that Jesus exists and you didn't accept him, you're going to hell, basically. Right. Did I get that analogy right?
I think it's Pascal's wager.
Oh, there you go.
That whole thing of like,
yes.
Well, you could be right, but if you know,
yeah. So honestly, I think a lot of what kept me in my faith for a long time was the fear of hell. Yeah. A lot of it, and the fear of losing community. But you know, there were always problematic things in the Bible that I did not like, but I just kind of was like, well, it's the Bible, and you know, this book must know better than I do. And then I was increasingly just so disappointed and disgusted by white evangelical Christianity, and their refusal to, you know, stand up to injustice and to acknowledge like the toxicity that they absolutely, you know, are a part of and push. So there was a lot of that. And there was a little while where I was like, you know, I can be a Christian without the church and without other Christians. And then it just, you know, like I can love people in the LGBTQ community, and I can believe Black Lives Matter, and I can do all of these things. That's just like, honestly, is like very basic humanity, right? Of like accepting people and loving people and saying, you know, that white supremacy is wrong. Like, these shouldn't be radical things. And yet somehow when you're still in the evangelical church, it's very, you know, liberal. Not happening. Yes. So them being also just so stuck with their politics, as opposed to just like loving people, was a lot of it also. Yeah. And then I just found myself at this spot of like, if this God is as powerful as I've been taught that he is, then what the hell is he doing letting children be raped and letting all of these horrific things continually happen, you know? Yeah. And there was a long time, there were a few years actually, where I just kept, even when I would bring it up to other people, it was constantly like, you're just going to have to accept it. And, you know, God's ways are not our ways. And you're going to have to figure out how to be okay with it. And I finally was like, I'm done. I'm done trying to figure out how to be okay with it. because like morally and ethically, somehow I'm superior to this God and I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Which was terrifying. And at the same time, so freaking liberating and felt so good that I was like, oh, I could have done this years ago. Like I could have been free from all of this so long ago, you know?
It does feel like you lose time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That was a painful thing for me to think about. It's like, man, I wasted some time.
Yeah.
Not wasted. I mean, it makes us who we are today. But to something you said, like, yeah, when you have those questions, they're just never answered. I always got the same thing, like, God's a good God, the devil's a bad devil. That's why bad things happen.
Right.
You get that whole thing, and it's just like, that doesn't hold. As you become an adult, it doesn't hold as much weight as it does for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely went through the same thing. It was really, for me, the contempt for poor people. That it was a prosperity element. And then I know that there were a lot of churches that were just like not into that, non-judgmental, affirming churches or whatever. I knew that existed. But even then, to me, it still felt like, okay, well, we're just kind of like lightly, for me, it still didn't encourage. It didn't go far enough, put it that way.
Sure.
None of those places were going far enough for me. So I think that was the whole thing. It's really, And what's interesting is also my youth pastor's from Truth or Consequences. The one that we had was from Truth or Consequences. That's interesting too. So I wonder if we cross-pollinated or went to the same, knew some of the same people.
Possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Small world, right?
It is.
Yeah. So, but yeah. The social justice element, I think that the outright there is an anti-intellectualism and anti-knowledge element to this.
Absolutely.
And that always bothered me because I always had interest and I was always interested in things. And then when those things were discouraged as some kind of affront to God, I think that was kind of the thing that kind of like, oh, and then at some point you get tired of it. You're like, you know what? I'm going to watch these art house films and I'm not going to burn in hell for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
What if that art house film was the reason you went to hell?
Yeah. David Lynch isn't gonna be the thing that gets brought up when I meet St. Peter or
right.
pearly gates. So yeah. But yeah. It's interesting now that we see so many people that are in our age group that are kind of going through the same thing.
Yeah.
Which has been comforting, but also like, man, like, I think now the silver line to all this is that hopefully like our kids won't have to go through the same thing. I think that we realize that, maybe our parents with their best intentions just went a little too overboard.
Yeah. And I think Josh and I talked about this recently too, like, with the best of intentions, our parents kind of let youth group raise us. And well, we don't know how to talk to them about sex, so youth group can teach them about sex.
Yes.
And all of these things, where I was recently reading this book called Pure by Linda K. Klein that was just wonderful. But she had interviewed this mom who was talking about the impact that purity culture had on her teenage daughters. And the mom was saying, like, she would take her daughters aside and like try and kind of combat the purity message culture and like, your body's not shameful, you don't have to hide it, all of these things. And she was like, but if I contradicted the youth group, then I was the one who was wrong. Like, it didn't even matter that I was their mother. They were trained in youth group that anybody who says anything that we don't agree with, they're the ones who are wrong. And Josh and I were like, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Or your parents out of line. Your parents can be out of line with God and what he wants for you. I never even thought about that. I need to read this book.
It's
that's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, that's true. Because then there were obviously things that even my mother as a Baptist would necessarily agree with, like the music thing. I mean, she mostly listened to like Christian music, but gospel music, but she also she was into music, she was a singer. And so there would be times where I'd be like, no, we're listening to the Christian. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, like breaking my CDs. Like it just didn't make sense. It was insane. And I remember do you guys remember when Jesus Camp came out? Did you guys even watch that, or did you have to?
I could not watch it. I couldn't.
I could not. Still have not been able to get through it. But I just, that was really what was happening, in a lot of cases in those summer camps as a kid. And then even as you graduate from being a little one to a big one, then you're like a leader and all this, and you're training the little ones into the same thing.
Yeah, it's crazy. Tamara was just telling me about, or we listened to it on something.
The Dirty Rotten Church
but
kids.
like, yes. So there's like this tactic that they use in at church camps that's very similar to cults. So in that, like, they will physically exhaust your body and then sit you down and pound this message into your head. So like
indoctrinate the crap out of you.
Exactly. Like they just keep you active doing all these different tasks, like ropes courses or just different activities that are fun, and they were a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But then your body is just so exhausted and you're mentally just so pliable at this point. So then they just come in and like continue this indoctrination process of pounding this message into you, but without any sort of reserve, I guess. You're not able to like put up a defense or anything because you can't. And that's a very similar method they use within cults and stuff, is that it's the exact same process. So it's just weird, like seeing all these different parallels between that. Yeah. I remember early on kind of seeing a lot of, I was studying into propaganda for some reason, like Nazi propaganda, and how they encouraged people to become Nazis in essence. And I was like, this is a really similar process to like what we went through in youth group and like throughout our church. And it was just like this shocking moment for me. So I think the reason that you guys have, or were able to see like, hey, something's wrong here because I can't just naturally love people without an agenda, was probably a lot more. It was a better reason than mine. Oh, your free meeting will end in 10 minutes. Goodness. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to ignore that.
Do a part 2.
Because mine came from I was very much raised to believe that everything in the Bible was 100% literal. It was like there was no contradictions. There were never any sort of it was the infallible word of God. That's what the Bible was. And so when I was studying apologetics, I found this circular reasoning and these arguments that just didn't make sense to me. And I was like, wait, that doesn't make sense. So I took like a very intellectual approach to my stepping away from faith. That was and that's kind of what started like me down the rabbit hole of thinking like, well, maybe this isn't so accurate, because now I'm able to see these contradictions if I'm not just dismissing them like I was taught to do. And because it was so literal,
there was no room for biblical theology and scholarship in the evangelical ecosystem. I feel like some of it, but it wasn't like people that you talk to a theologian now where there's like a school of ideas, right? Or what this means and that means, and scholars are looking at things, and evangelicals have come along and kind of said, we've got that all sewn up.
Yeah, you can't challenge it. You can't question it. There's not a possibility of both of these being right. Yeah.
So we've got it all sewn up. So that became an issue. Obviously you said the apologetics and like figuring out, okay, well, St. Thomas Aquinas, who's that? The old saying like, well, we don't believe in saints. People either go to one place, they either go to heaven or hell. You know what I mean? It was just like, it's this idea that there is no agree to disagree about what this means and that means. And it's just like, we all have to be on one accord, as they say. The church has to be in unison. And that I guess, now looking back on it, I was like, that is kind of cultish.
Totally. I remember a few years ago when Leah Remini's show came out about Scientology and the aftermath, and I was obsessed with it. And there were so many times, and this was while I was still a Christian, that somebody would talk about the way that they were brainwashed. Mm-hmm. And every time they would try and, critical thinking or something didn't sound right, and they were trying to figure out why. And then it would go back to like this specific thing being drilled into them, or, whatever it was. Okay. And every time I was like, how do I relate to this person so much the whole time they're talking about being brainwashed, Mm-hmm. And eventually I was like, I think I may have been completely brainwashed. Yeah. Like, I'm not sure, if all of these things were presented to me, in a proper non-fear-mongering way, would I have ever picked this? Like, mm-hmm. would I have chosen to believe in this and commit my entire life to it?
Yeah. I think that there's this misconception about cults that because you're free to come and go in these churches, right?
Yep.
That cultism has to lead to like the one guy with the one agenda with this like doomsday thing, when it can be a lot less obvious. And mm-hmm. I think now we're learning and realizing that now, as opposed to, decades ago when we didn't know. Yeah, that's I haven't watched her. I've seen her give some interviews about Scientology, but I haven't really watched that series. I'm going to put it on my list to watch it now.
It's really interesting.
I've never. I know she talked about it quite a bit, but that's another. I mean, I live in LA, so I definitely avoid.
Yeah,
I walk straight across the street. Don't want to, come take the personality test.
Don't.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pick it up. Bring it muted. Okay. Anyways, we still have a house phone here, by the way.
Love that.
Nice. So we were talking about getting one of those for our kids.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So do they have cell phones yet or no?
No.
Yeah.
Earl, this is only 10. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. See, they're little. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah.
So was it a lot, like you had mentioned the social justice and not being able to think critically. Was that what kind of broke it all for you?
Yeah. And also, I mean, I started out as an art major too, as well. And I just found that like, there was so much, this idea that so much of art is provocative, mm-hmm. And political in some cases, mm-hmm. and emotional, and all these things that really don't, I felt like it was limiting to creativity. And once, I kind of got out of that. Like I left the church and I was kind of into, what happened was I did read Jesus Wants to Save Christians. I got into Rob Bell and these red letter folk. And I was like, okay, now this is going to allow me to have heresy, still, be able to do whatever I want. And then, mm-hmm. As I moved on, I've always had this interest in, like magic and things like that. But I think just from a perspective, like I never really wanted to identify as a witch or anything like that. I just was interested in other religions, other faiths, like culturally interested in everything. Mm-hmm. I'm a nerd. I fall under the neurodiverse umbrella. So that's a part of getting obsessed about niche topics is definitely a part of it, I guess. But I couldn't do that. I remember I had a book that I had created of, it was like 14 of like spells or something stupid. And I showed it to someone at school, and then obviously like I got called up to the altar call, and like they were like, we're gonna lay hands on you and get the devil out of you.
Oh,
and I was just like, and it was just like stupid, like Wiccan. It was like Wiccan, like harmless Wiccan stuff. It wasn't like anything, I wasn't, but this was in the time of like peak Manson, peak, new metal.
Yeah.
I remember my youth pastor, somebody had like a corn, she found her son's corn CD, and she was just like, I heard it means kitty porn. I looked it up on the internet, and, she just did a whole got on a soapbox about it, and people were like breaking. It was just like the most ridiculous, ridiculous thing ever.
Absolutely.
So like, but now as an adult, I realize like some of these things have, and then like, obviously going to evangelical school and going to public school, you get exposed to actual history, and actual, like where these things come from. I was always curious about, I feel like I was always into the paranormal. I'll put it that way. And like spooky stuff. So that obviously is just like a no-no. And now I was free to kind of be like, I'm into these kind of things. It's okay to like horror movies. It's okay to be interested in this stuff and not like, in a way that's going to be, it doesn't mean that God is like somehow going to abandon me and let, the demons take me to hell,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. That's really what it was. It's just like limiting my curiosity. And like making this idea that, again, like God is like, you cannot be in line with God or in communion or in kind of community with other Christians if this is who you are. Mm-hmm. And it just makes sense because I didn't see other people from other faiths doing that. Mm-hmm. I had friends that had different belief systems, and I did not see this insanity. You know what I mean? Like, yep. No religion's perfect, fine, but I never saw, my Jewish friends were very grounded. Yep. You know what I mean? And friend that's Hindu, they didn't have these same, like, these things with purity culture and these like insane. I mean, of course, in some ways those things existed, but not in this way that would keep them from sequestered from other human beings. Yeah. Yep. So yeah. If that's a good answer.
Makes sense. It sounds like, I mean, obviously I know you were Tamara, but Marcé, it sounds like you were also heavily involved in that whole process. So what did that process of leaving look like for you guys? Was it a difficult one, or was it just like an easy sever ties and Tamara, be done with it? Go first?
Yeah. It was definitely more of a little process because we were very involved in our church. So during 2019, of course, there were several times throughout our relationship, I think, where Josh, or I would struggle with, still grasping to have faith in this religion. And one of us would talk the other one back in. Mm-hmm. And probably the middle of 2019, the beginning, I don't know, sometime in that year, I just kept I can't believe this anymore. It's just, I'm trying to force my mind to. I wanted to believe it, but I couldn't. I just couldn't force it anymore. And I finally came to a place of you know what? If God, or if the Bible is true, it's been pounded into me that it is, then he's the one who's supposed to give faith, right? Mm. So if he wants me saved, he's free to give me that faith. I'm open to it, right? Obviously, I cried and begged him for it, and he didn't. And I was just cool, you're out, I'm out. Let's just do this. But Josh was still leading worship at that time. Mm. And I was still volunteering in children's ministry at that time. And we had just had one of the other leads in children's ministry go on maternity leave. So I was okay, well, I'll take the next 2 months. I'll cover for her. And our children's ministry director was such a lovely woman. And I had told her look, this is where I'm at with my faith. I can absolutely not sit down and teach any kids about the Bible, but I'll help you with the administrative stuff, And she was so kind and so gracious. And she was if there's anywhere you should be able to wrestle with your faith, it is here. This should be a safe space for you, which I really appreciated. But that commitment kept us at that church 3 months longer than we wanted to be there. Mm-hmm. So there was even times where I tried to still sit in and listen to worship or listen to the teaching. And every time I had a physical reaction. I thought I was going to throw up. My muscles were so tight. I was so uncomfortable. And I just every time had to get up and leave the sanctuary and just wait for service to be over. Mm. So then we only showed up at the times where I had to volunteer or Josh had to volunteer. And then basically as soon as that commitment was done, we were both out, just completely out. Oh, it was 2018 that happened, not 2019.
Oh, this is recent.
Oh, wow. Yes, it was.
Yeah. So it was 2018.
Wow. Okay. So you guys haven't been out that long. Okay.
Yeah.
Still
so then we were free.
Free. Yeah. You were a worship leader. That's a whole nother.
Yeah.
Whole nother aspect.
Another
layer on the cake.
Juice drinking.
The cake.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I drank that juice hard. I was in it.
I know it's particularly there's so many politics in music ministry as well. Yeah. For me, I mean, I've been out. When was the last time I've been to church? Actively been out for maybe we'll say 2014. I think it's the last time I've been in a church and in a service. But like out, like mentally checked out, probably 2010, 2011 was when but this new in the past, like since I've been kind of listening to Mitch Horowitz and kind of on the path of like figuring out like what I believe now has been going on since like 2015, like where I really like allowed myself and didn't like kind of like broke free of like, all the usual deterrents were gone. I didn't think they would be a thing. I just knew that I was like, you know what, there's more to this universe. There's more to this than, Genesis through Revelation. So, yeah.
So was that difficult for you to make that call and just like get out of it? Or was it just kind of a nice realization and feeling of liberty afterwards?
Difficult in the sense where I think the hardest thing was this, I'll be completely honest, this idea that you cannot, this idea of like operating not with the Holy Spirit in mind and what that spirit is and how that operates in our personal life. Because I definitely felt pushed in a different direction. And whether or not, where I wrestled whether or not that it maybe wasn't God or wasn't a good force, as Chawan calls it, the invisible hand. So I couldn't, I was just terrified in a sense, that I was making the wrong choice. But then I realized, I was like, you know what, if I am, at this point, I can make sense of like, if God is who he says, who I think God is, right? It won't be a problem for me to like turn back around. Like, cause there's some people that just believe you can go too far and you won't come back. I don't believe in that. And I was like, and I knew, and then I just knew, and also I was living in a place that I'd never been before. And I had to figure out something, I think, cause I needed something in distress. And I started looking at a lot of friends that were, when I'm telling you, they're really into Zen, really into meditation and Buddhism. And I found some benefits and some interest in some of the things they were saying. So it kind of like opened myself up a little bit. And like it was really the culture clash or the cultural shock of moving to a big city, to be honest, that finally, made me figure out, okay, it's a big world. Yeah. I had a lot of anxiety and I couldn't apply some of those principles in LA that I had grown up with, to be honest. And not some of the moral stuff. It's just like sometimes, you can't be nice. Sometimes you can't be, some of the things that we're taught in, some of these cultural things that we're taught in small towns don't apply in major metropolitan cities. So yeah, that was it for me, I think. And then in terms of it being hard, I think that like for a lot of the people that I went to school with, I think we all had our like college 20s experiences. But a lot of them have gone back to the church, the evangelical way of living life. And then some of them have not returned or they go to a different church or whatnot. But it's a little different now because I know a lot of them listen to the podcast and they're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. It's like, well, surprise. I don't know what else to say. You guys have been going on and on about Trump or whatever you've been talking about. Sorry, like thanks for the support, but I don't know what you want me to, I don't know what you expected. So
yeah.
I hear you. What about you, babe? I know it was tough. What was the toughest part about cutting those ties?
I guess probably the loss of community. I mean, that was, everything. We were so committed to the church. And yet at the same time, I don't miss it, but I would like to find something where it's easier to meet other people, like the church was, I think probably like the actual hardest part was probably losing the assurance. Like I so viewed the world as black and white. And the older I got, the more that I saw the world, the more I was like, it's just not, it's not black and white. And that, helped my faith crumble. But yeah, there were so many times where it was so nice that I was like, I know what the truth is, and I know what's going to happen to me when I die. And I know that if I follow X, Y, and Z, this is going to be the outcome. And now I'm like, I don't know shit. Like, I know nothing. And it's okay. Like I've accepted it. I'm okay with it. But it was really nice having that assurance.
Yeah.
Blissful assurance.
Yeah. You know that you know.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you're like, well, now I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know that that's a fact. Yeah. I didn't really, I have to say, I lucked out, I guess, because when I was on this exploration, I was going to different metaphysical stores and stuff like that. There was already a community ready to embrace me on,
yeah,
in my pursuit of whatever I'm pursuing. There was already a community of people that were like, oh, you're into this? Well, you should read this, So
yeah.
I could see how that could feel like you're abandoning your friends and family. I do not talk about, I don't know if do you guys talk about this stuff with your family at all? Or how'd that go?
Yeah. Because it was such a big part of each of our identity, I'll just speak for myself. It was such a huge part of my identity that I was like, I have to tell people that I'm not anymore. And part of that is because I really hate that aspect of Christianity where somebody's always like, you're a Christian, you shouldn't be doing that. Or, aren't you a Christian, but you said that? And I was kind of like, I want to be free from people feeling like they can say shit like that to me. But it also just felt like, because it wasn't something I took lightly, because it was so much of who I was, I felt like I had to tell the people around me that truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I've been far removed enough to where I can get away with not having to explain too much. I think I'll say this. The hardest part for me is knowing that there's a lot of folks that I know that are LGBTQIA, still in the church and still trying to figure that out. And I think that there is a little bit of abandonment on my end. I think that, sorry, it's my remote thing. I think that I do carry a little bit of empathy for them a little bit. But also it's like, I just couldn't, I don't understand how they suffer like that in those environments. But I think that was really hard, or that's been really hard. But that was also one of the reasons why I left, because I, spent a lot of time with my queer friends. And and now, people are like, oh, hate the sin, love the sinner. And it's just like, well, it's not a sin. Sorry. You're not going to, get me to kind of even have that admission, because I just don't believe in that either.
Yeah.
But there is something liberating about telling people what that you no, you can't put that on me, because that's not a part of my identity anymore. Yeah, I could see how that's, add to the added trauma of all the other shit that we've been through. It's just well, now I'm leaving, and having those, and Christians always want a lot of boundaries, but they're never willing to give people the same boundaries.
Yep.
Some people don't want to be challenged on their beliefs every 5 seconds, but they, for some reason, when they're talking about trying to, convert people, that's all out the window. I can poke holes in what your belief system is. And it's just like, but you wouldn't want somebody to do that to you. Right. But they don't have the same kind of, they don't offer, especially like evangelicals don't offer that same courtesy, or that respect that like, I may not be a Hindu or I may not be a Buddhist, but I'm not going to like tell my Buddhist friends that they're living wrong. Right. Or that they have the wrong belief system. I feel like a lot of evangelicals don't have that respect. So
yes, especially within evangelicalism. What is the word when? Oh my goodness! Just having permission to go into something. Sorry, I'm blanking on words here.
Okay. Consent.
Consent is not a part of evangelicalism.
No, it's not. It's really not.
So. I mean, this is kind of a weird segue, I guess, directly from that. But where, Marcé, do you think you are on your spiritual journey at this point, or where are you on that?
I don't know. I think for a minute, I think everybody wanted me to say that I was some kind of witch, and I'm not a witch. I have witch friends. I've had a lot of magicians and witches on my podcast, I guess. But I think that ironically, I do believe in a little bit of the Christian mysticism. I'm superstitious, if that makes sense. So right now I'm more interested in kind of discovering cultural rooted spiritual practices, whether it's in like African traditional religions or if it's, hoodoo, whatever. I'm interested in those things, but I don't know if like it'll be a part of the completion of my belief system. But I do know that I do know what works. So I think when I talked to somebody on my podcast about this, and I liked what he said. He was like, he doesn't like to label. He likes to talk about actions. So do I have a meditation practice? Do I have a prayer practice? Yes. Do I, try to live by a certain set of morals? Yes. So, but I would never, I don't think I could like label myself anything at the moment. And not because I'm one of those people like, I don't like labels. I'm still learning. Yeah. Does that make sense? Totally. So I don't want to like assign myself something that I'm not fully, fully like aware of what all that entails. Cause I think that's a huge issue too. I think with TikTok and then like all the social media, everybody wants to be a witch now. Or some kind of like sorcerer. Yeah. That's fair. I think that it's important to be knowledgeable before you, take on those titles. So
yeah, that makes sense. Do you still feel like pretty like connected spiritually?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I always have it. I think that's probably why I'm not an atheist, or agnostic. I, of course, have a lot of those friends that are, but I've had just really odd experiences. And when I say like paranormal, I mean like, people talk about out-of-body experiences, and I'm sure that can be scientifically explained as well. Spooky things, ghosts, and just different occurrences that I just feel like that I could not just assign it to, or just like completely like assign myself to, okay, now I'm an atheist or agnostic. I've had too many experiences that I'm certain of that have been, there's something else going on here. There is something, right?
Sure.
So yeah, whether it's DMT elves running the universe or not, something's going on. So yeah. And I know that a lot of my friends like that have left have gone the opposite route. They're just like, nope, no God, no nothing. And I get that. And I get that. Like it probably doesn't serve me to kind of like spin my wheels on this for the rest of my life, but I just enjoy it. So it's not like I'm searching for anything. It's just fun for me also. Yeah. But I know some folks that are just like, no, there's nothing to this. We exist and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of why I've had a problem with the term seekers. I like it, but at the same time, I don't really feel like I'm seeking for something specific. Plus, that just gives way to the whole Christian argument of like, well, we have your answer. But Tamara, what about you? Where are you on your spiritual journey?
Yeah. That's funny that I knew you were going to ask that, and I have no idea how to answer it. There was this really good analogy that was used in that book, Pure. And one woman who had left the faith had talked about, when you're an evangelical or really committed to Christianity, but you have all these doubts and everything's like slowly crumbling, which I definitely related to. She was like, I had this moment where I was just running and just trying to keep up and trying to figure out my faith. And she was like, and it was this Wile E. Coyote moment of like, I've run off the cliff. Like, and I look down and I'm like, there's no faith holding me up anymore. But she was like, but unlike Wile E. Coyote, like I didn't fall. Like I just floated. Yeah. And she had said, and on this ledge over here is like my spirituality, basically.
Right.
And here is like, I don't know, but I loved that analogy and related to it so much. But I was like, I think I'm still floating. Like, a few years later, I still feel like I'm just floating, and there's so much freaking peace in it. Like, I don't feel like I need the answers. I absolutely don't want another religion that, fills the spot that Christianity was in my life. I feel like I'm happy not claiming any spirituality. There's definitely a part of me. I love this thought and this idea that there's divinity within all of us. And I don't even necessarily know what that means, but like, maybe that's just energy and we're all connected in one way or another, I think that's a really beautiful thought. And, I feel like I'm okay, like saying like, yeah, that's a beautiful thought. And I don't need any proof to back it up. And I don't, I don't need to fight anybody about it. I can just think that's lovely. And so let's treat everybody with kindness, and let's try to make this world more just and equitable for everyone, because we don't know what comes after this, but we do know that we're here now. So like we should probably put the effort in to make sure that all of the people around us are cared for.
Yes. I love that. I love that. I think that's a good way to look at it. And also, if you've been in ministry for 10 plus years, you probably need a break. Yeah. So you probably don't need to make anything overcomplicated or stressful for yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it must be nice to have your Sundays and Wednesdays free, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, goodness.
It's so nice.
Yeah. Because the church is like a job. It is like a business. It's run like a business. It's a job.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like having another job. And yeah, I feel like you probably just need a break. Like I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't, again, like I don't blame people for being like, you know what? But yeah, like I like this thought and that's it, I'm just incredibly nosy and I can't help it myself. Like,
no, I think that's so fair. And I think if you have that curiosity and that desire, then it's probably healthy to be feeding that, right? And to be learning more and gaining knowledge.
Yeah.
That's great. And my brain is just like, I'm good. I don't want any more.
Yeah. Like, I'm out of the, you can keep, I'm, not my circus anymore. Yeah. I definitely, I can relate to that for sure. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, guys, we, I believe with our break and everything, we have about hit an hour. Okay. So we can keep talking after this, of course, but is there anything that you guys hoped that we would cover on this that we haven't hit yet?
I don't know. I feel like you have a good number of questions. Like I don't remember all of them, but I looked at them and I thought about it. I had my mind in the way. I hadn't looked at them in a day or so, but should I look at them real quick and see if there's something?
Yeah. Why not?
Are there any questions you didn't ask?
There was a little bit that it's a loaded conversation on its own. From Marcé that we've had the conversation about over Instagram about like racism and like within the evangelical community. But I think that could potentially be another episode entirely. So in our own experiences, so I don't know if now's the best time to get into that, but
probably
but we
not.
can.
But I mean,
we can at some point.
I'm always willing to talk about that because that was a unique experience in itself, and kind of, and also like where I live geographically, where I grew up geographically, there was just a lot of it. And it's in the church too. Like a lot of like, I love you and your family, but maybe not all Black people. I understand, race and things. You know what I mean?
Microaggressions.
And, microaggressions and stuff, and kind of come to that realization with this last presidency, and having a lot of people, parents I know, go full on Paula White was not a good time, and full on Q, and that there were some tough conversations had. And some friendships that won't be the same. So, but yeah. Purity is the book, though. I'm going to get that book. I'm going to read it.
Pure.
Yeah, Pure. Pure is the book. Okay, Pure. Yeah, I'm going to get that because,
I'll drop it in the show notes.
Yeah. I had fun. This was fun.
This was great. Thank you.
It was nice meeting you, too.
Yeah, you too.
It was nice meeting you. And Josh, I know you, of course. It was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So, I've been trying to get the Dirty Rotten Church kids on they need to do a decompression con or reconstruction con where we all
deconstruction convention.
Yeah, and it should be open bar.
I feel like they've actually talked about doing that with Kevin Garcia.
Oh yeah, I love Kevin. Kevin. Love Kevin. I asked him specific questions that people always ask me. About church and about like, this is a question I have for you, Josh. Do you feel like, were you guys taught that like you can only kind of have the spiritual connection to God in worship and that whole thing? Like, how do you reconcile that? Like that whole thing, like this is this is the only time that you can, this is where God inhabits when we are in worship. Well, and outside of that is kind of, that you need to be in that to have these like transformations in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I would answer that by telling you worship is a lifestyle. It's not found in a single setting, but yes. So yes, it very much was that, but it was also kind of this idea of like, well, worship isn't just the song and singing and stuff, but it is something that you continue to do. So you're either, was it Driscoll who had said like you're either worshiping God or you're worshiping something else?
Yeah, you're always.
I don't know. Like there's something. just bringing up that name like cringes something in me. But like so you're just we're built as creatures of worship. So that's essentially the argument there is that we're constantly in some form of worship, whether that's directed at God or our own idolatry, because it's it's either God or it's idolatry. So
that's what I thought. I was just curious. It's a good thing. We could dissect all this stuff all day. Purity culture as well. We should probably do we should probably do a whole purity culture episode. Totally. I haven't done one yet. I haven't done one yet, but I'm focusing on Arab jinns and Middle Eastern magic right now, and it's all dense.
Whoa.
Yeah. I infiltrated a Facebook group of practitioners, so I've been nosy, and I asked one of them to come on the podcast. So I tried to.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Told you can be a nosy, get you in trouble, I guess. Whatever. But it was really nice meeting you guys. You guys you guys went to Calvary in Albuquerque?
Yeah.
I wonder if you know Laura Lee Booth. Sound familiar?
Not ringing any bells.
No. Okay. Because I know they went to Calvary. I know she grew up at Calvary.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then there was another church in Truth or Consequences where she met her husband, who was our youth pastor for the long.
Who was your youth pastor?
Wow. For his name, and he passed away. what's his name? He died in 2001. Angela was the pastor's daughter. Leroy, Pastor Leroy,
Okay.
Van Antwerp.
Oh, yeah.
No, Van Antwerp was his last name, but yeah.
That's so devastating, though.
Yeah, it's really sad. Yeah, and yeah, there's a whole melee around that because the church had split, and they couldn't afford a better plane, and it was blamed on the other congregation. It was truly insane.
Oh my gosh,
it was truly silly season for a long time. So, yeah.
Wow.
Goodness. Well, on that note,
Yeah. All right. It's great talking to you guys. Enjoy your evening,
Marcé.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for hopping on with us. This was
thank
great.
you for
we'll
inviting
definitely
me.
do another one.
Ramble. Thank you.
Yeah. You kidding? I love it. That's why I hop on Clubhouse.
All right. Have a good one. Are you and Tamara, are you on too?
Awesome.
Yes. Josh added me on Clubhouse.
Okay.
All
but
right.
There's a lot of people. Kevin's on there, so we should all get in a room one day.
Oh, that would be cool.
Kevin's on there. I know Britt's on there, and they do a lot of deconstruction work.
Nice.
Yeah, we can schedule something. Just do a big fun dissection of something.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be cool.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Awesome.
You too.
Well, we're out. See ya.